because movies are the only thing we have to go off of. Like, oh, they like shooting at these people like 50 yards away. You know? Like, and it's like, yeah, in World War II, like maybe that happened a lot, or Vietnam or whatever. But in Afghanistan, it was fairly unusual unless you're like doing a DA, you know.
You're right.
And we would get after this specific one, it was like a maybe 100 yards, probably a little closer, like tree line to tree line. And we had gotten out there, and before we even got into the tick, like we were patrolling to this area where we knew like there's bad guys over here. We're probably going to get into a fight, and that's what we were after. But the Tacky W, he's got his Wolfhound. He's like, you know, ICOM chatter is coming from that direction. It's like fairly close, and they say they can see us and whatever else.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like rallied up, and a villager comes up and talks to the Terps, and they're like, oh, there's an IED by this guy's house, right? So I get called up. I was in Alpha Squad, so like the recon element.
Okay.
I was always up near the front. I go up there to check it out, kind of long range, and it's like there's like a guy's house off to the left, path down the center, and then off to the right there's a tree, and this IED is just like sitting under the tree, maybe like 15 feet from this guy's house.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting on the ground. It's like a paint can sized object, wrapped in this like green foam and then like barber pulled with electrical tape. And it looks brand new. Like it doesn't look weathered or anything like that. So like, obviously I'm sketched out. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is really weird. And I like do long range recon, looking through, my scope. And sometimes I would carry like little binoculars with me as well, looking in the tree, looking around. Eventually I sweep up to it. I can't make anything out from the outside. Like there's no visible like firing system, anything, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is suspicious. Like what we can do. And I talked to Ty and Scott. That was the chief and the OIC of the platoon. I'm like, I know we're going this way. And then we're going to come back this way. So we can just bypass this. It's not, directly in our path of travel, and we can blow it up on the way in or the way back.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. So we're kind of rallied up for a minute. A few minutes later, they call me back over and they're like, let's just blow it up. And I can tell it's because they're like, this is going to alert the Taliban that we're here and we're going to get into a fight.
Yeah.
So they, I heard you talk. I was listening to the one the other day with, I think it was Kyle.
Yeah.
And just talking about sometimes you look back on things like, what were we doing?
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about some of that stuff now where it's like, if it had gone wrong, right? Like we had lost a guy, somebody had gotten shot, whatever, you probably look back on it and be like, that was dumb.
Right.
What we were doing is kind of dumb. But because that didn't happen, it's like, that was awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I put a block next to it. It was definitely an IED, like it was full of HE. Blew it up. We moved to the next tree line and like, it pops off like right away. Tree line to tree line, like super close. We had probably like 12 guys with us that were just soldiers for this Afghani warlord that was in the area. Like they would link up with us sometimes.
Yeah.
Not to be trusted. Like these dudes are not to be trusted, right? But they don't like the Taliban, right? So they're friends.
Yeah.
And they start flanking up this left side along the wall. One of their dudes gets like lit up like 7 times in the legs. They come carrying him back. His pants are like just completely soaked in blood. Our medic, Corey, he like gets to this dude and he puts on, have you ever seen that tourniquet where they put it on like the pelvis?
No.
Yeah. So there's like I forget what it's called. And I just briefly remember seeing him use it because this guy was shot up in the legs and, and the pelvic area, you can internally bleed out from that like super fast.
Like just really high up or
no,
all the way around?
Like a specially made thing where it's almost like it looks like a diaper type thing.
Really?
Yeah. And it's supposed to, I guess, stop the bleeding. And this dude survived. So it must have worked.
Wow.
Yeah. So, the typical fight in Afghanistan is like take contact, shoot back, call an air, right?
Yeah.
And they decimate everything. and then you leave.
Yeah.
And that's how things would go for us. And I think on this mission, we initially had an Apache, which like the difference between an Apache and an A10 is like night and day.
Yeah.
It's like this dude's just shooting him with a machine gun, like pop, pop, pop. And then, you know, that A10 comes in and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, like it is way more impressive and way more effective. And that was the one when we got back, they were like, this is unusual, like to get into a close tick like that, you know, like tree line to tree line. And that was coming from like the experienced guys on the platoon. Ty, he was the chief, and then Joey, he was the LPO.
Yeah.
He's a great dude. He's one of those guys like talking about earlier. Like some people are good at being a SEAL and some people aren't. Like that dude was really good.
Yeah.
At, like just all things of being a SEAL. Great dude.